Hello, my beautiful worm children, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's time for the remainder of the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark stories, but in a tier list, as if they're competing for blood. Which is only fair, because if you know anything about these particular books, you know that the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books are basically some of the most macabre things that children have probably ever been subjected to, other than, horrible war crimes. But growing up in America, this was kind of the worst thing at the Scholastic Book Fair, which made it the most appealing to just about everybody. I made a video a long time ago about the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books, and sort of analyzing them. It wasn't nearly as long as this one because I have become a psychopath. But in that video, I asked, if anyone else had Scholastic Book Fairs, and it turns out it's like a worldwide phenomenon. Everybody had Scholastic Book Fairs, and at those Scholastic Book Fairs, it turns out everybody picked up a copy of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And isn't that fantastic? I personally love that. I think that's great, and I want to embrace everyone that was forced to purchase one of these copies of the book and were traumatized by the contents of it. The book was penned by Alvin Schwartz and drawn by Stephen Gammell, an absolute devil man who is from hell and is probably a bastard, even though I think he's a gentle soul. I hear that people like him a lot, like IRL, and that's really sweet. But my god, did he really fuck up a lot of kids' lives. Good for him, and good for me, and good for all of us. Honestly, I don't even know if I'm even complaining. The Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books were one of the best things that ever happened to me when I was a kid. Not because it gave me the truth behind the crippling reality of being human, but also it opened me up to this world of stories and wonderment that exists around the world. And because of that, I feel like I know a lot more about a lot more things than I would have had I not ever gotten into folklore through Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. For a lot of kids, folklore was introduced to them with these books. They went looking for campfire stories about people getting cut up and people dying, and it turns out you get that, but you also get this weird abstract take on the world and death. Just look at this image of the church here. I mean, there's this white void underneath, as if the ground below you has nothing underneath it, and the sky above you has nothing above it. Everything is made of all the other things, and everything is monstrous. Almost everything in the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books comes across as uncanny, partially because of the illustrations, but also because the stories themselves are usually dealing with some sort of macabre truth, like the disappearance of people being mangled and murdered, people dying and decaying and rotting. And when you're a 7-year-old kid and you're hearing that you yourself will one day be rotting, it's a little confounding to handle. And now here we are, fucked up people. After the fucked up children, we are weird worm people that have grown to crawl and wiggle across our planet in pain and screeching into the void in the suffering of existential pain that we now experience. And all of this is because of Alvin Schwartz and Stephen Gammell and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So today, we are going to be finishing up our tier list of all the remaining stories, and I'm going to carefully walk you through every single story. We're going to remember what that story is, we're going to talk about what it means, if possible, and I'm going to give it a big old rating, even though I don't believe in numeric lists, and I also don't believe in ratings. But for today's purposes, we're going to be putting all of these stories head to head, and we're going to be making a big master list of what stories are the best and which are the worst. Let's get started. Okay, so this one's really interesting to me because it's basically taking a concept and turning it on an abstract. So it's the concept of Dracula, someone coming up to your window, being kind of scary looking and luring themselves into your home only to try and suck blood from your neck. And then eventually people find this person and kill them in the manner that you would kill a vampire. So it's taking the vampire story, the traditional Dracula vampire story, and sort of turning it on its head and making an abstract, sort of absurd version of itself so that we can interpret it for what it is, which is a really, truly horrifying thing. A monster coming in to suck blood out of your neck? That's terrifying. And it lives forever? It lives forever. So the window also has a terrifying piece of art, and it's gonna get an S from me, dog. So this is your standard be careful what you wish for story, but the problem with it is that it's campfire bullshit and it's all about leading up to a big jump scare at the end, so it's kind of dumb. And I think anybody with like even a third of a brain would be like, damn, this sucks. So I'm gonna have to give this one a D. Sorry. Okay, this one is just generally scary. It's kind of like a lot of the stories in this book where you think one thing, but there's actually a twist. And a lot of the twists in this book are kind of bad or dumb, but sometimes they work and sometimes they kind of creep you out. The one that I think about most primarily is the one where the people stay at the burned house, but they don't know that it burned and they just think it's normal. That genuinely horrifies me in a weird way, and I feel like The Bus Stop is kind of one of those stories. It's basically a guy falls in love with a girl on a bus stop and he just thinks that everything between them is gonna be fantastic, but then he never sees her again. He goes and finds her mother and she's been dead for 20 years. He fell in love with a ghost. Aw, shit. And of course, we've all heard stories comparable to this, ghost stories comparable to someone falling in love with a ghost and then them turning out to not have been alive at all. But I think this is more about the complacency of life and how much you want to see love in everybody you see more than anything else. So I'm gonna give this one an A. So there's a ghost and it's looking for money and it's kind of like vampire bullshit. And if you know anything about vampires as a cultural relic, a lot of the times they were portrayed as the aristocracy or people desperately seeking money, which unfortunately has a lot of ties nowadays to anti-Jewish conspiracies, which it could potentially have always been. When I read this Clinkety Clink story, it kind of made me think about that and how perhaps this folklore story is actually an anti-Jewish conspiracy. That said, on a story level and on an art level, it's pretty dang cool. So I'm gonna give this one a C. I guess that's fair. This one, yeah, I don't know, not my favorite story. So The Trouble documents a poltergeist activity pretty much every single day and every little event that happened on each one of those days, and this poltergeist slowly builds up to where it's just fucking up this house. Basically, if it sees an object, it's gonna fuck that object up, and that's really funny. It is quite troublesome. The story's rather long, but I think it's pretty good at documenting how strange things can become normal over the course of time. And I'm gonna give this one a B. This one is on a boat. There's somebody that falls from a loft and they fall in such an impossible way that people would think that they had to have been killed, but they're obviously a corpse person and they get up and they run away. Holy shit, who's this person? Which member of the crew is this? But then when they look through the crew logs, it turns out it wasn't a member of the crew. It was just a ghost. And ghosts are very scary, so I'm gonna give this one an A. Also, this drawing fucks me up every time. He was dead the whole time! Okay, this is another one of those very classic, very brief stories about being dead and how that's actually more alienating than being alive. So it's instead of thinking that being dead is this wonderful, heavenly, magical thing, you actually are dead and feeling displaced and you don't understand why people are treating you like you're a monster, even though you are a corpse now. You are a walking dead person. So there's that. Probably one of the ultimate scary stories to tell in the dark stories. I sure love it. I'm gonna give this one an A. This one's kind of weird. Confederates see a weird blue light a lot, and so they basically start seeing a ghost ship, and they see it a couple of times. And I guess this one's based on some sort of account from back in the 1860s when Confederates supposedly actually did see a ghost of a pirate ship or some crazy something. Overall, it's just a wild story that people actually believed back in the day, and it is kind of some southern folklore. Confederates sometimes see ghost pirates and they scare them. I'm gonna give this one a C because ultimately I don't care. This one, it really fucked me up my entire life. This one was one of the ones where, every time I was afraid of the dark, I was worried about the voice coming to get me. Just this disembodied voice that's I'm coming to get you. Now I'm on the stairs. Now I'm on the second step. Now I'm outside your room. I'm coming to get you. So yeah, something's coming to get you, but it's displaced. You have no idea what it is. It's this like creeping paranoid feeling that most of us now feel from our jobs. This creeping paranoid feeling that we now feel about our government. Ah, the creeping paranoid feeling that occurs in the dark. Once upon a time, we were like, it's gonna be some weird amalgamous something, you know, raggling its way up the stairs after me. But no, 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 it turns out, politicians. I'm gonna give the voice a double S, as it is one of my favorite stories in the whole book. Okay, this kind of goes in the urban legend category, which I explained in the last video, but there are urban legends in this book that are briefly covered and covered to some level of nuance depending on like which region of the urban legend you're actually hearing. This one is pretty essential, like everyone has heard the story. There's like movies based on this concept, but basically there's a babysitter. The call's coming from inside the house, oh no! They do this in Black Christmas, they do this in Halloween, they do this When a Stranger Calls. I think they remade When a Stranger Calls. I think they even do this in both Prom Night and the Prom Night remake. I could be wrong about that, but this one is very deeply rooted in folklore. So I feel like The Babysitter is like one of those classic urban legend stories that you just kind of have to know. And if you don't know it, I genuinely would be surprised. But yeah, the call is in fact coming from inside the house. I'm gonna give this one an A. Okay, really, really fucked up horse one. Hate that it's a fucked up horse one, but here we go. We got ourselves a fucked up horse one. So a guy is turned into a horse by a witch, and the witch like rides him around for a really long time, but then when she gets complacent, he turns her into a horse and turns himself back into a person. She's a horse, he puts horseshoes on her and then turns her back into a person. So then she becomes a person horse who has horseshoes on her human feet. And that is the most fucked up image that I, as a child, had to deal with for a really long time. That one still bothers me in me old noggin there, and they really went gentle on the old drawing for this one, I tell you what. I'm gonna give a new horse an S, as it is fucked up and hell. Okay, so this one is just about, like, the plights of chivalry. The guy runs up and he's like, may I carry your basket? To, like, a girl who's got a basket. And so he carries her basket, but then inside the basket is her head, and then it bites him many times. So basically, let women carry their own shit, my dude. Like, stop trying to carry women's shit. I'm gonna give this one a B. I love this story. It's a wives' tale that I've heard many times in my life, but it's kind of an untraceable source thing. I think that's what I like about scary stories that tell in the dark, actually, is that a lot of the books are trying to capture wives' tales that don't actually have much of an origin. They're just something that people believe. So something that people believed once upon a time was that grave robbers would steal wedding dresses from the dead and then resell them as wedding dresses, and then brides would buy them, wear them on their wedding night, and then die having been killed by the embalming fluid that was all over the wedding dress. And maybe this was true. Maybe this did happen back in the day, but oh man, that's pretty far-fetched and horrific and fucked up and crazy. And ultimately, it's like a jest on the irony of the two dresses that women wear, that being like the one on their wedding day and the one when they take in their grave. Basically, they are kind of used interchangeably, and maybe they mean the same thing. Who fucking even knows? So White Satin Evening Gown is gonna get an A from me, dog. Alright, so this one's just about how much it sucks to die and decay and be 7 years old and have to hear about this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you had to cope with that through a few of these stories, but this is definitely one of them. I'm gonna give this one an S. Okay, so there's a guy and he's like constantly bragging about his view out the window in an old folks home. This one guy's like, I'm gonna kill him so I can see what the view is out the window. So he kills the guy sort of in an indirect but totally murder fashion. The guy dies and then he takes his bed and looks out the window and it's just a brick wall. Oh boy, what a fucking bummer it is to be alive and do capitalism. I think this one is literally about how human beings will fuck each other over for like the propagated lie of something better than just like the basic good of having company and having a healthy, happy life. When you want more, sometimes you get less. The Bed by the Window is a classic tale. I'm going to give that one an S. God, we're getting all S's. Matter of fact, here's a couple more S's for you. So this one's about how Death is kind of bitchy, and like if you go confront Death about like, hey Death, what are you doing? You fucking with my son? Death will just be like, oh no, I wasn't fucking with your son. I have to go fuck with your son later today. I was just in town. Which is so bitchy of Death, am I right? Like what an asshole. I'm gonna give this one an S. I love Death being an asshole. Also, take a look at the sick drawing, it's crazy. One of the classic scary stories to tell in the dark story is like, I feel like when people think about this series, they immediately think of Wonderful Sausage. So basically a guy like makes some human sausage out of people in the community and he serves it to the community, and the community starts to notice that people are going missing, so they feed him to the machine, and then they make great sausage out of him. And oh boy, what a bummer it is to become the sausage you made other people out of. This one gets a double S for me, as I love it and it's one of my favorite stories of all time. I love Wonderful Sausage. It's just such a comeuppance story. It's just, you get exactly what you deserve. It's another one of those kind of anti-capitalist takes that a lot of folklore has. A lot of this stuff is rooted in kind of the paranoia against a lot of colonialism and imperialism and things like that were going on across the country in reaction to a lot of the expansion that was going on in the United States. So some medical students put a dead man's hand up at a light switch so a woman will grab it, but she grabs it, and then phantasmagorical nature of this just immediately makes her die from fright. Just makes her just have a nervous breakdown immediately, and then they all feel really, really bad about the prank that they did. Because it turns out that a lot of medical students, like back in the day, had a fairly phantasmagorical attitude towards like limbs and people's deaths anyway, because ultimately they were dealing with a lot of amputations like all the time. They would haze other medical students by like fucking with them with actual body parts, and this would lead to a lot of people having serious existential and nervous like anxiety problems for the remainder of their lives because of these pranks. What a silly thing. People being so desensitized with this that they just start hitting other people in the face with limbs. The Bride is also one of my classic favorites from this series. The Bride basically talks about a bride who went hiding like in her reception party, and she hid in a trunk, but then the trunk got locked and no one ever found her. They thought she ran away or they thought something happened to her. And then 20 something years later, they open up the trunk and there's her mummified body lying in the trunk. And oh my God, what a fucking nightmare when you're a little girl and you're thinking about your wedding day and you're just like, oh cool, I'm gonna do some ditzy stupid something. Everybody's gonna forget about me and I'm gonna die suffocating in a trunk. Sucks to suck, but it's also kind of weirdly true, and I'm super sure that while this is a wives' tale, I'm pretty sure something like this probably happened, which is kind of spicy. Ooh boy. I'm gonna give The Bride a double S, as it is one of my favorite stories of all time. This is a very funny story about like how sometimes people die, but they aren't necessarily ready for it. Like they have too much energy and you're just like, how could this person be gone? Like they have so much energy. So the story is about a dead person coming back and being mostly like rejected by society and confused, but then they realize if they want to get rid of Aaron Kelly's like dead bones and let him actually rest and go be at peace, they're going to have to party him out until he is actually ready to die. They have to party him down like a Chad, and when they finally party him down like a Chad, he's able to go rest. And isn't that just the best? I'm gonna give this one an S. Okay, so this one's about a guy who either hears a ghost and it's like a murder scene, or he actually hears a woman get murdered and then doesn't do anything about it or doesn't really react to it, and then all of a sudden he sees the ghost of the woman who was just murdered and she's like, hey bud, thanks. So this one's kind of great. I think it's mostly just about like the concept of an immediate punishment for inaction. Like if you don't get up and do something when you feel like you're hearing something wrong, it's going to haunt you for the remainder of your life. You're always going to be thinking about that woman that you didn't help. So this one's going to get an A from me, sister. So this one's about a woman who goes to a church that's basically a ghost church where there's just a bunch of ghosts worshiping God and they're in the church doing church shit. And I guess the irony being that even the dead are waiting on the coming of the Lord. Like even the dead are like, is there a God? Is God coming? Like, I think that this is a hilarious idea that we think that when we die, we're going to get all the answers, when it's more possible that when we die, nothing's going to happen, or we're just going to sit around being like, well, fuck, now what's gonna happen? Shit. I think the story is mostly just about how the confusion of life doesn't end at death. You're always gonna be confused about life. You're never going to understand it. One Sunday Morning gets a B from me. Just Delicious is about a woman who has to cook a liver for her husband, but it's the best liver ever, but he is an abusive husband, so she's like, shit, I ate all of his liver, he's gonna kill me. So I gotta go next door and grave rob a liver, feed him that. So she feeds him that, and of course he loves it because cannibalism is supposedly really great to do. I personally haven't tried cannibalism, but I'm not close-minded. So in essence, she makes him do cannibalism, and then when the actual person comes to get their liver back, she's like, he ate the liver, he ate the fucking liver, and then the ghost like fucks him up. A woman doing something like that is only carrying out that action to protect herself from somebody who's horrible, and the person that she's like protecting herself from is the person who should deserve punishment for this entire situation anyway, because if he wasn't an abusive scumbag, none of this would have happened. This one's gonna get an S for me, as it's a fantastic story that I love. This one's pretty simple. A woman's on the subway. She sees 3 guys get onto the subway. One guy leaves, another guy leaves, and then the third guy's sitting there and he's just not moving and not moving and not moving and not moving. And when she finally goes to check on him, turns out he's been shot in the head and is dead. Oops! Sucks to see that and have that happen. I guess this one, is mostly just about how death is a part of our society and we frequently run into it or can see it, or it's on the fringes of things, and we don't like to deal with its reality, but its reality is kind of everywhere and you don't expect to see it on the subway, but there it is. Also, the idea that there's like some sort of shadowy, secret, evil killing of people going on is always a haunting thought, but every time you hear about people getting murdered, you're like, shit, people do in fact get murdered on this planet. Holy fuck, that could be me. So this one's gonna get an S from me because I love it. Okay, another S, classic, like perfect story. It's about a girl who gets a pimple because she's going through puberty, and this completely freaks her out, of course, because she doesn't know why she's getting pimples or what pimples are. And then it breaks open and a bunch of spiders come out. Turns out a spider laid an egg on her face, and then a bunch of baby spiders crawl out of her face. Puberty is scary as shit. Nobody knows why it's happening. Nobody knows when it starts or when it's going to end, and it haunts you like an evil virus. And it does very much feel like spiders are just going to suddenly begin crawling out of your face, and you really don't know the difference between spiders. You know, just a pimple at the end of the day. This one's gonna get a double S from me, as it is one of the best stories in the whole book series. Oh man, it's Harold time, my bitch. Harold is the like flagship story of this whole thing, and how could it not be? It's basically just about a revenge getting scarecrow, but what a long-winded and good story this is. Ultimately, it's about 2 farmers who get bored. They build a scarecrow that's somebody that they don't like after somebody they don't like, and then they begin to like make fun of it and then start to abuse the scarecrow and start to do all kinds of unspeakable things to the scarecrow, and then the scarecrow gains a level of sentience, gets tired of what its creators have done to it, and then runs off, comes back, and fucking murders somebody. Goddamn, we love that. What a fiery scarecrow. I want to be friends with this scarecrow today. Also, I will say that the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark movie got the vibe of Harold correctly, but dang, I really wish they would have actually done the story, because I felt like the story was super good. My biggest beef, I guess, with that whole movie is just that they didn't do an anthology. Like, they didn't tell these stories. Like, these are great stories. How are you gonna not tell these? Like, these are the entire point. It's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Like, why are you not gonna make that the movie? Anyway, I had a lot of qualms with that, but I do like that they got the vibe of Harold, even if for a couple minutes. So I'm gonna give the movie an F, but I am going to give the Harold in the movie an A. So congrats, Harold from the movie. And also, Harold from the book is a double S, as it is probably the best story in the whole series. So a guy kills a little boy, and he also kills the little boy's dog, and instead of being haunted by the little boy, he's actually haunted by the little boy's dog, who just torments him forever. And I guess this is more about how the details of something end up being the thing that fucks you up about it, more than the actual whole of it. So a lot of people think like the fucked up things about life are remembering these like horrible acts that you did, but it's actually remembering like the details of the horrible things that have happened, and not necessarily like the overall broad concepts, which you can usually handle. So while this guy has moved on from the fact that he killed a little boy, he hasn't yet moved on from the fact that he killed the little boy's dog. So he's haunted more by the little boy's dog, because that symbolizes the whole interaction instead of the little boy itself. I'm gonna give this one a B, as it is kind of psychologically taxing on my brain. Okay, so this one is about a ghost cowboy, which is pretty sweet. We like a ghost cowboy. I wish I knew a ghost cowboy. I unfortunately don't even know any real cowboys. Yeehaw. Cry me a river, me. So there's like a couple, and the father doesn't want them to be together, so the guy like dies of loneliness, and the daughter has to go live in a different place in the world. But then one night, the ghost cowboy comes riding into town to bring his daughter back to her father and reunite them. And then they're like, what the fuck? I thought that guy died. And then they're like, oh shit, he did die. He just reunited us for some reason. I guess he felt really bad about separating, you know, daughter and father. So I'm gonna give Cold as Clay a B. I love this story. I love this story. I love this story. Basically, a guy gets a weird dog, and everybody's like, that's a fucking weird dog, buddy. That dog is nasty. That dog is crazy. Why is that dog an asshole? And then over the course of time, people are like, I don't know if that's a dog. And then turns out it's a sewer rat that has rabies that's just been running around attacking people, and the guy thought it was a dog. This is just hysterical to me. I don't really have much to add. I think any sort of meta-narrative that one could read into this would be better off left read with you, because ultimately I just want to enjoy this drawing because it's fabulous. I'm going to give this one an A. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is known for having the jump scare page turn, which is like you turn the page and it's the scariest thing you've ever seen. And when you're a child, that is like a very visceral experience. So it's actually great that we can talk about these nowadays in hindsight and actually realize the mechanisms that were at play back then and how they affected us. So the haunted house is the best example in the book of a page turn jump scare, in that it builds up this whole story about how there's this ghost woman in a haunted house. And it seems so standard, but then you flip the page and she's just horrible looking. She's a queen, but she's horrible looking. The whole story ends up being about how like her finger bones can detect the killer. So in order for her body to be put to rest, he has to take her finger bones, and put them in the collection plate at church. And then the guy who puts the money in, the bone attaches itself to him, and then they know that that guy is the person who killed her, and then she can be at rest. But ultimately, good God, this image is fantastic. It's fire. It's everything I love about this series, so the haunted house is going to be getting a double S from me. Don't ever laugh as a hearse goes by, or you may be the next to die. It's the best song ever. It's a banger. Everybody loves it. Double S. I like this one. It's basically a guy shoots a cat, and then that cat turns out to have been a witch that transformed into a cat. The midst of transformation of being half cat, half person, and like yowling and spitting like a cat, having been shot with a gun. I think this one is mostly about how appearances often deceive. It's kind of the Cinderella vibe of like sometimes at midnight people turn into different people, and you need to remember that sometimes people will lie to you for a really long time until they reveal to you the truth, and then it's bad. So this one's gonna get an A from me. I like this one. Basically, it's the story about how a guy doesn't want to get on an elevator. He doesn't want to get on like a train or a bus or whatever. And both of those times, there's like a horrific accident. A bunch of people die. So the answer is, if someone ever says to you, room for one more, you always just say no. Because you don't want to tip the scales in the wrong direction and end up getting yourself fucking killed. So if you want to escape death, the idea is be patient, relax. Don't try to do too much at any one time. You gotta make it through this life as a patient sort of person. Don't be like me. Don't upload 7 videos that are an hour long in 1 month. This one's gonna get a B from me. So one time when I was a kid, I was walking down the street and I saw this box. And I was like, ooh, a box. This is before Amazon, so boxes were kind of amazing. And so I walked over to a box and I opened it, and inside was a dead cat that was rotting, and it had like just larvae coming out of it. It was just the most horrible thing I've ever seen. It sticks with me to this day. I still remember this image. For some reason, it kind of like cohabitates in my mind with this story, because the story is basically about how a woman like sees a cat and feels bad, so she puts it in a shopping bag because it had died. It was like roadkill. And then she goes to the mall, accidentally gets the bag shopped with some little girl's Christmas present. The little girl, like her mom is like, here you go, here's your present. And then she opens it and it's the dead cat. The aristocrats. The aristocats? Huh? Anyway, it's basically about how sometimes you're just vibing and then all of a sudden you have to be confronted with your death at the age of 7. Sort of like this book does to people. Wow, you made a story about yourselves, huh? Spicy. I'm gonna give this one an S. So this one's about a guy walking through the woods and he sees a girl that he knows, but she had died and he doesn't say hello to her. And so she continues to follow him until he continues to not say hello to her because he's too scared because she's dead, until eventually she gets up in his face and like scares him. Or disappears or something like that, something equivalent to that. The bit here being that the dead are always just going to be displaced on Earth, and no matter how hard we try, no matter how much we like people, even if we're attracted to somebody, if you see their dead body, you're probably not going to like flirt with it or want to flirt with it or know what to do. You're probably going to be overwhelmed with terror and run away and pee your pants like me. This is just a cute story about a ghost and his dog, ultimately. Basically, there's a ghost singing, and the dog in the house is like singing back. So they sing back and forth to each other until eventually the dead body comes in through the chimney, scares the dog to death, and then the dog and the ghost continue on living for the remainder of their ghost life, singing together. Meets Hidoti Walker. And isn't that fun? We love that. I like a good ghost and his dog story. I'm gonna give this one an A, friends. Okay, this one's kind of an interesting take on the Wendigo. It's more like from a Western perspective, like a white person being scared about the native person they hired being attacked by the Wendigo, or the Wendigo coming upon them. So as far as I know, like the Wendigo is more something that is feared in native communities because it's a metaphor for what can happen to a person, what can become of a person if they allow themselves to give in to their shittier, baser instincts. It's ultimately a call to action to always be better, always trying to be a better person. From a Western perspective, looking at it as an actual monster that comes and gets somebody is a little bit spicy, but whatever, we'll take it. It's an interesting take. It's an interesting, somewhat problematic take on the Wendigo. I'm gonna give this one an A because it is rather neat. Even though, honestly, if you want to know more about the Wendigo, you should know more about the Wendigo. Like, look that up and understand, like, what it means from a native perspective more. I'm gonna give this one a B. Basically introducing Bloody Mary to children. Like, if you didn't know about Bloody Mary, now you do. Bloody Mary is a thing. If you say it 3 times, she comes and gets you. I even set it in a mirror just now. There's a mirror right off screen. I set it into the mirror and nothing came and got me. So, myth busted, I guess. I'm gonna give this one an A because it is genuinely creepy, and I think everybody did this at a party when they were a kid and it scared the shit out of them. This is the classic Lover's Lane urban legend, which is basically just like there's an escaped killer, he's got a hook for a hand, they hear scratching on the door while they're, doing intimate, things in the wood. Then they learn that the killer, left his hook on the door, and they're like, oh my god, it was the killer, he left his hook. Super scary shit if you're 15 and you want to go make out with somebody in the darkness, but you don't want to get hooked. I'm gonna give this one a B, as it is a really cool urban legend, but also I feel like this is another one of those that you've probably heard before, so you really don't. This isn't the first time. This is another great urban legend. I think everybody loves this urban legend, but it's sort of the woman's driving, there's a guy behind her, he's constantly flicking his high beams on, and then off, and then on, and then off, and it starts to freak her out. She drives home, and then she, runs away from the car, and the guy jumps out, and she's so scared of what this guy's gonna do, but he's like, stay away from your car, there's a guy in your back seat, he's gonna fucking kill you. So it turns out there was a crazy guy in her back seat the whole time who was totally going to murder her, and the guy with the high beams was actually helping her. Well, it's kind of the whole being a woman at night story, but with the little twist of sometimes the strangers that you see actually are trying to help you with this, as well as hurt you. And sometimes the things that are the threats are the things that you're not outrightly seeing. Sometimes people just flicking their lights are trying to help you. But that juxtaposition of not actually knowing when someone's trying to help you and when someone's trying to hurt you puts you in this weird position where you have to be paranoid about everything. So I love high beams. This is a great story. I'm gonna give this one an A. This one really freaks me out now, but it didn't when I was a kid. And I think the reason it freaks me out now is just because as my life has gone on, I've realized this is just a true fact of reality. You can't really avoid this fact of reality. A woman is sent on a series of pointless tasks, and then when she finally gets back to her hotel room, her whole family has been checked out and there's no record of her existing or having ever been at that hotel. So then she's just left with this quandary of going, oh my god, what happened to my family? Who do I call? Where do I go? What do I do? And the best that they can invite her to do is just remember what happened differently. And the reality is, for a lot of people, this story is actually capturing something that happened in the plague era, which is sometimes people get a disease and it's a scary, horrible disease, and they get it. They are then suddenly scooped up, and then they send somebody else on this long, arduous, nonsensical task to distract them from the fact that they scooped up their family, and that family is just gone. And then you just have to figure out who you are and deal with it without it. One day you very much are going to wake up and realize that your parents are gone, that the people you know and love are gone, and there are new people here, or you are the only person in charge of your future. And this is harrowing for so many people, especially me. I hate it. I hate this reality, and with COVID, I think this only got nastier and scarier. So I'm gonna give this one a big old double S, as it is the scariest story in the book for me these days. It's a lame vampire bullshit story, but very, very long, and it ends with a jump scare. So it's the same campfire bullshit, kind of doesn't have an ultimate great point. It's not the most amazing thing in the world. I'm not a big fan of it, so I'm gonna give this one a D. And here we are, kids. We've arrived at the last story from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and it is my personal favorite story from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. So needless to say, this one's gonna go in the double S category. So there are these kids, and they go meet another kid in the woods, and the kid's got this magic cool drum. And the kids want the drum, and they want to play the drum, but in order to do that, the child tells them they have to go piss off their parents. So they go, and they piss off their parents. They come back, but they haven't been bad enough. They have to go piss off their parents worse. So they continue to piss off their parents until their parents eventually say, we're done with you. We're going to just leave you somewhere. We've fucking had it. We aren't going to be your parents anymore. And the kids piss them off even further, just assuming that they're going to deal with it. And then the parents are gone and then they're alone. And then they go back to the people that have the drum and they're like, we finally did it. We scared away our parents. The people don't want to give them the drum. The people aren't there. And then they're just left entirely alone. Just the two of them, without parents, without any hope, without any future. And they just have to make their own way in the world and learn about all these things in and of themselves. The drum, I think, serves as a metaphor for scary stories to tell in the dark as itself. The scary stories to tell in the dark books are themselves the drum. And we keep wanting to know more and more about the contents of these stories and what they mean to us and what they mean to us culturally. But ultimately what we realize is every time we dive back into this subject, we take a piece of our past and a piece of ourselves with us and we trade it for the thing that we get. And often the thing that we get is something that just isolates us, something that tells us that we need to survive on our own and figure things out on our own. All of these stories for children are here to shock you, here to tell you about the reality of your own death and your demise. But ultimately, the most amazing aspect of them is that they're a call to action. These books are literally telling children, you're going to die, so get out there and live your life. And no one can help you. Your parents can't help you. Your friends can't help you. You are all alone. So you better get out there and make something of yourself because we're all going to be rotting in a hole. And it doesn't matter what the variables of that are. So you better get out there and actually be living your life. And don't you ever laugh when a hearse goes by. Because you might just be the next to die. I fucking love these books. I can talk about these for days, and I probably should, maybe, I don't even know. I feel like I pretty much covered it. Honestly, these stories mean so much to me, and they meant a lot to me when I was a kid. They still mean a lot to me. I reread this book at least once a year, and it just reminds me to be myself. It reminds me to take care of myself, because ultimately, there is nothing that's going to do it for me. There's nothing that's going to do it for you either. All we can do as media people or people that write or pass along these stories is to try and convince people that they need to be living their life to the fullest, to their own definition, because no one's ever going to do it for them. If we're going to be meeting God one day, we're going to be meeting God in a way that's probably only going to serve to confuse us further. It's only going to lead to us having more questions and more and more and more questions. And at the end of the day, the questions don't matter. The reality matters. And the reality is we need to be out there enjoying our life. Azzy, can you bring me the ferret? Bring me my ferret! Ferret, thank you. Hand me the marmot, please. So, you're gonna see in my hands here, this is Angie. This is a little ferret I have. So someone abandoned this ferret outside my apartment. Someone just straight up abandoned her. And I feel so bad about this. And honestly, I don't know all that much about taking care of ferrets, but I've recently learned quite a bit about it. I learned something from this little baby, this little bug who I love. And that is that, you need a level of freedom in this world to continue to be alive. When I met this sweet little girl, she was super stoked to go play and have fun. And she's running away right now because she really wants to go play and have fun. But over the last year, a lot of us have been so deep in the wells of comprehending our own death and freaking about the possibility that any day one of us could die. And also not even that, but just never building an ego, never choosing to try to be a person or try to do anything with yourself, because ultimately, what's it all for? What's the point? And upon meeting this ferret and seeing this ferret run around and seeing this ferret just play and have fun, just with more space and whatnot, I found myself going outside more, and I found myself enjoying my life a lot more, and just trying to like suck the nectar out of the basics of like what makes life good. Scary stories to tell in the dark is going to tell you is true. You know, these are the realities that we are going to be dealing with. But for now, we can frolic around and have fun and go running around, and we can go to sleep as long as we want, and we can make all the crazy videos that we want about all the subjects. And you know what? We can delete our pre-transition videos if we want to, and we'll just remake them and they'll be better. Just like this one. Wanted to thank you for coming out. Thank you for subscribing and liking this video. And if you love my videos, consider supporting me on Patreon. I am going to be back very soon with another thing. I've just been working a lot recently. I've got a lot of ideas, and I've just been making a lot of videos. So I don't think that's going to be stopping anytime soon. I think you can expect that to be just more prevalent as time goes on. I'm getting really excited about my YouTube channel, and I'm almost at 100,000 subscribers. Like I'm literally like less than 2,000 away, y'all. And then I'm gonna get that silver play button, and I'm gonna smash with a hammer or sell it on eBay. It's gonna be amazing. But also, I'd really like to thank Alvin Schwartz and Stephen Gamble for creating one of the greatest children's book series like I ever read as a child that completely formed me into the person that I am today. From me and Angie, I just want to say good night, and I love you, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Let's do a little hug, like a one-armed sort of hug. Oh, come on, honey. Oh, baby. All right. Goodbye. Don't ever laugh when a hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in bloody sheets to drop you 6 feet underneath. They put you in a pine wood box, cover you up with dirt and rocks. If all goes well for about a week, and then your coffin begins to leak, and the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms may pinnacle on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose, and as you begin to decompose, a slimy beetle with demon eyes chews through your stomach and out your sides. Stomach turns to rancid grease, pus pours out like melted cheese. Spread it on a slice of bread, and that's what you